Russia and the USA exchanged prisoners, with the United Arab Emirates acting as a mediator. Moscow released Ksenia Karelina, who was convicted for transferring $51.80 to a Ukrainian organization that later used the money for the needs of the armed forces of Ukraine. Washington released Arthur Petrov, who was accused of supplying microelectronics in violation of sanctions. The CIA stated that the prisoner exchange highlights the importance of maintaining dialogue between Washington and Moscow. Narbaka, the main news in the studio with Anna Krupina. Russia and the USA agreed on measures to facilitate the movement of diplomats and their visas. This was reported by the head of the Russian negotiation mission, Alexander Dorchiv, following the meeting in Istanbul. According to him, it took place in a positive atmosphere. Diplomats from both countries emphasized that direct flights would contribute to expanding business ties. The parties agreed on guarantees: unimpeded banking and financial services for embassies, including Russia's contributions to the UN and other international organizations. Moscow stated that its priority is the swift return of the diplomatic property confiscated in the USA. The parties are also ready to work on a roadmap. Today, another round of negotiations between Russia and the USA took place. The meeting lasted 5.5 hours. The State Department described it as constructive. They expressed concern over Russia's policy prohibiting the hiring of local staff for the diplomatic mission in Moscow. In the morning, TASS reported that the USA is ready to staff the embassy with diplomats up to the number that would allow issuing visas to Russians. The delegations agreed to meet again soon, to complete the discussion on the banking services for the embassies. The date, location, and composition of the mission will be determined later. Tariffs against China have been raised to 145%, not 125%. This follows from the White House clarifications, reports CNBC. The 20% are additional tariffs on fentanyl, which Trump previously imposed on China. The USA began imposing tariffs on Chinese goods in February, and Beijing responded proportionally. A sharp escalation of the tariff war occurred on Tuesday. Trump invited a significant increase in tariffs if Beijing does not cancel the retaliatory surcharges. China responded with a 34% surcharge. The USA raised the tariff to 104% and Beijing to 84%. And yesterday, Trump announced an increase in tariffs to 125%. A few hours later, he called the chairman of the PRC, Xi Jinping, his friend, and said, "I think we will eventually make a very beneficial deal for both." China will not tolerate intimidation from America and will fight to the end. This is how the Ministry of Commerce of the PRC commented on the increase in tariffs by the United States on Chinese goods. There, the mark: China has the capabilities to overcome challenges in foreign trade. Pressure, threats, and blackmail are the wrong ways to interact with Beijing. The country is open to dialogue, but it must be conducted on equal terms, said the ministry. China will not yield and will give a decisive response to Washington's attempts to sacrifice the rights of other countries for its own dominance, stated Chinese media.
Taking necessary countermeasures against the intimidating practices of the United States is aimed not only at protecting our sovereignty, security, and interests, but also at maintaining international justice and fairness, defending the multilateral trading system, and the common interests of the international community. Those who uphold justice will receive broad support, while those who oppose it will find themselves isolated. The reckless and unjust actions of the United States go against the will of the people and are ultimately doomed to fail. If the Americans decided...
The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs is confident that there will be no winners in the tariff war. The international community's outrage over Trump's policies will grow, and ultimately they will fail. The European Union is suspending the implementation of countermeasures on US tariffs for 90 days. This statement was made by the European Commission. The EU wants to reach agreements that will be beneficial to both sides.
Our approach has not changed. We are preparing for all outcomes. All our tools are on the table. We want to talk with the Americans. We want to reach agreements that are beneficial to both sides. We have proposed 0 for 0 on industrial products and goods. We believe that we can achieve beneficial results for both sides that will avoid the types of tariffs that we consider harmful and counterproductive. We continue all our preparations.
The moratorium on tariffs announced by Donald Trump. The European Commission called it an important step towards stabilizing the global economy. But if the negotiations fail, the EU will impose retaliatory tariffs. The European Commission also stated that Europe will continue to diversify its trade partnerships. The decision by US President Donald Trump to postpone the imposition of tariffs for 90 days is related to Japan actively selling US government bonds. This was reported on social media by a correspondent from the Fox Business Channel, which is close to the White House, and he referred to unnamed top executives. Similar information is also provided by NBC. According to their data, US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent persuaded Trump to suspend the tariffs. As NBC claims, they were panicking over the bond market situation. The American president himself rejected the idea that the stock market crash was caused by the tariffs. According to Trump, there is a systemic problem here. He also said that when making decisions about tariffs, he is guided by intuition.
On Monday, you said there would be no moratorium on tariffs. Now you have announced this pause. How can people trust your words? The question is that you need to have flexibility.
You need to have flexibility. I could say, here's a wall, and I'm going to go through this wall no matter what. However, you won't be able to go through the wall. Sometimes you need to be able to walk along the wall, climb over the wall, or go around it. I thought that after the tariffs were introduced, people started to go beyond the limits. They began to get a little scared and became overly cautious.
Before announcing the moratorium, Trump posted on his social media account that it was the perfect time to buy stocks. And after the moratorium, US stock indices sharply increased. Now Democrats are accusing the American leader of market manipulation. The White House has denied these accusations. Amid the stock market surge, the world's richest people collectively became $304 billion wealthier. This is the largest single-day increase in the history of the Bloomberg ranking. According to a survey by the research company YouGov, almost 50% of US residents believe that Trump primarily acts in his own interests. And 30% are confident that the president primarily considers the interests of the states. There was a malfunction in the applications of T-Bank, T-Investments, and Ozone.Bank PSB. Users also report issues with transfers through the fast payment system. The reasons have not been disclosed. A malfunction in this system was recorded on March 26th. Additionally, there were reports of disruptions in the operations of T-Bank, Yandex.Pay, Ozone.Bank, and Alpha Bank, and VTB. Roskomnadzor said the issues with the fast payment system were related to a failure in the infrastructure of the national payment card system. On March 30th, there were also disruptions in the operation of several websites and applications. These included services like Yandex, Cian, Cooper, Vikusnaya Tochka, and Magnet. Roskomnadzor reported a surge in complaints related to the operation of services that use Yandex.Cloud resources. The agency attributed the cause to a power supply failure at one of Yandex's data centers. The water and beaches in Sochi, Tuapse, Crimea, and several other settlements are safe for swimming after the oil spill. This was reported by Rospotrebnadzor. Oil products reached the coast of the Krasnodar region and neighboring areas due to tanker wrecks last winter. According to the agency, no air quality discrepancies were found in the resort areas. In Crimea and Kuban, there are no violations of sanitary requirements. In samples of fish and drinking water, all these areas are outside the ecological risk zone. There are also none on the beaches of Gelendzhik, no traces of fuel, oil, and oil product fractions. Local authorities expect the resort season to proceed as usual. In Anapa and the Temryok district, near where the wreck occurred, all 150 beaches were inspected from February to April. According to Roskomnadzor data, supervision on these beaches and in their maritime area in the emergency zone with tankers has revealed deviations from the norms. The situation remains under special control by the department's specialists. The housing issue in Russia will be resolved in a way that was not possible, either under the Tsar or in the USSR. Vladimir Putin expressed this point of view during a meeting with the CEO of the corporation Dom RF, Vitaly Mutko.
Housing issues are some of the key issues in the life of every person, every citizen, every family. One of the most sensitive issues, the resolution of which affects the well-being and social welfare of Russian citizens. I believe that we have every reason to think that we will be able to address the main issues in this area in a way that has never been done before, neither in Tsarist times nor in Soviet times.
Mutko believes that if the key interest rate remains high for a long time, it will affect the volume of housing introduced in the 27th and 28th years. He noted that many people have postponed buying apartments and are keeping their funds in deposits. But when the situation changes and people start withdrawing money from banks, there might not be enough supply in the housing market. As a result, prices may rise. He emphasized that it is important to prevent a shortage of supply and a rise in apartment prices. Subsidies to regions will begin to be distributed more quickly. This was stated by the head of the Russian government, Mikhail Mishustin, at a cabinet meeting.
It is very important that such resources are delivered to the regions as quickly as possible, and that the regions themselves receive information about the volume of transfers as early as possible. This will allow them to prepare their budgets more thoroughly, plan funding sources, and pace the resolution of tasks, including within the framework of national projects, which we are monitoring on the President's instructions. For this purpose, and by the decision of the head of state, we will move the start of work on the distribution of subsidies among Russian regions to an earlier date for the next budget cycle. It should begin as early as June 2025, so that the selection of volumes and results is completed no later than August.
As Mishustin said, last year more than 3.5 trillion rubles were allocated to support Russian regions. According to the head of the cabinet, these funds were used for the construction of hospitals, clinics, and the renovation of engineering communications. In Russia, 274 car dealerships closed in 3 months, and 213 of them were Chinese. This is more than the brands from China lost in Russia for the entire year before last. This was stated in a study by Gazprom Bank Auto Leasing, the materials of which are available to TASS. According to analysts, in the first quarter of this year, Chinese dealerships began to actively lose investors. The leader in closures was the brand 26 showrooms. The brands Giaki and Havel did not lose investors, as stated in the report. According to experts, all this is due to the strict policies of distributors and insufficient business profitability. The problems are also explained by increased competition. Too many car dealerships have opened. EU and NATO countries are studying the deployment of troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire, reported the head of the EU diplomatic service, Kaja Kallas, before the meeting of defense ministers of the Coalition of the Willing. The main goals of the meeting were outlined by the UK Defence Minister John Healey.
Our dual consulate. Our plans are real and substantial, they are well developed, and we have clear goals for Ukraine. Firstly, a safe sky. Secondly, a safe sea. Thirdly, to support peace on the ground. And fourthly, to support the Ukrainian military forces and their own stronger potential deterrent. We must put more pressure on President Putin to stop the war and increase our support for Ukraine both in battle and in peace.
A number of countries are ready to participate in sending military forces to Ukraine, while others are not, said Kallas. According to her, different formats are being considered, from a monitoring or peacekeeping mission to strengthening the Ukrainian armed forces. Russian officials have repeatedly spoken out against the deployment of peacekeepers in Ukraine. In particular, at the end of March, the official representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Maria Zakharova, stated that London and Paris are disguising a plan for military intervention in Ukraine as a peacekeeping mission. Prada is buying Versace for $1.3 billion. The company has agreed on this with Capri Holdings. Regulatory approval is still required. The deal was at risk due to the decline in global stock markets after Trump announced tariffs. The holding company has owned Versace since 2019 and purchased it for a much larger amount, $2.1 billion. But recently, the corporation's revenues have been declining, and Versace's revenue for the last reporting period decreased by almost 30%. Capri Holdings intends to invest the proceeds from the sale of this asset into developing their main brands, Michael Kors and Jimmy Choo. Meanwhile, at Prada, known for its minimalism and austerity, they stated that acquiring Versace will attract new haute customers to them.